This is a true story of how inflatable tanks, fake radio signals, and one general's reputation convinced Adolf Hitler to keep his best armored divisions 200 miles away from the real D-Day invasion. On June 6, 1944, over 150,000 Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, while Hitler's panzer reserves sat idle near Calais, waiting for an army that never existed. That phantom army, the First United States Army Group, commanded by General George S. Patton, was nothing more than rubber tanks, wooden planes, empty tents, and carefully scripted lies fed to German intelligence by British-controlled double agents. For weeks after the Normandy landings, German high command still believed the real invasion was yet to come, and by the time they realized the truth, Allied forces had secured a beachhead that would lead to the liberation of Europe. What you're about to hear is the story of the greatest intelligence operation in military history, a deception so complete that it saved thousands of lives and changed the outcome of the war. This is Operation Fortitude, the strategic dilemma. Where will they land? Let me take you back to 1943, when Allied commanders faced a brutal reality. Everyone knew an invasion of Nazi-occupied France was coming. Hitler knew it. His generals knew it. The only question was, where? The most obvious answer was the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, just 21 miles of water separating Dover from the French coast. From a military perspective, Calais made perfect sense. The shortest sea crossing, the quickest route to Germany, and excellent port facilities for resupply. German intelligence expected the invasion there, and Hitler had concentrated his strongest defenses, part of the vaunted Atlantic Wall, along that stretch of coastline. But Allied planners chose Normandy instead, 150 miles to the west. Normandy had longer beaches, weaker defenses, and the element of surprise. But there was a lethal problem. If the Germans figured out the real target and rushed reinforcements to Normandy before the Allies could establish a beachhead, the invasion could collapse into a catastrophic slaughter. Planners estimated that Allied forces would need at least 48 hours after the initial landings to secure enough ground and bring ashore enough men and equipment to withstand a major German counterattack. If Hitler's panzer divisions, his elite armored forces, should reach Normandy in the first day or two, they could drive the Allies back into the sea. The solution was deception on a scale never attempted before. The Allies needed to convince Hitler not only that the invasion would hit Calais instead of Normandy, but also, critically, that even after the Normandy landings began, they were only a diversion, and that the real invasion was still coming at Calais. Imagine being one of the planners in London in late 1943, knowing that your lies will determine whether thousands of young soldiers live or die on a beach in France. You can't change the weather. You can't give them more tanks. All you can do is lie and make the enemy believe it so completely that they ignore the truth even when it's happening in front of them. The birth of Bodyguard and Fortitude. In July 1943, a secret group called the London Controlling Section began designing Operation Bodyguard, the overall deception strategy for the invasion. The name came from a quote attributed to Winston Churchill. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. Bodyguard was an umbrella for multiple deception operations across Europe. The centerpiece was Operation Fortitude, which itself had two parts. Fortitude North was designed to make the Germans believe the Allies would invade Norway. Fortitude South, the main effort, aimed to convince them the invasion would strike Pas de Calais. The Allies had learned hard lessons about deception earlier in the war. In North Africa, a brilliant British intelligence officer named Dudley Clark had pioneered the use of fake formations, dummy equipment, and controlled information to mislead the enemy. At the Battle of El Alamein in October 1942, Clark's team convinced German forces that the Allied attack was coming from the south by creating fake tank tracks and building a dummy pipeline to an imaginary fuel depot. When General Montgomery attacked from the north instead, two German armored divisions were in the wrong place, and the battle became a decisive Allied victory. For D-Day, Clark's techniques would be scaled up to an unprecedented level. But there was something else the Allies possessed that made the deception possible: two secret weapons called Ultra and Double Cross. Ultra was the code name for intelligence obtained from Bletchley Park, where British codebreakers had cracked the German Enigma encryption system. The Germans believed Enigma was unbreakable and used it for their most sensitive military communications. They had no idea the Allies were reading their messages in near real time. This meant Allied deceivers could plant false information, then intercept German responses to check whether the lie had been believed. The double-cross system was even more elegant. MI5, British counterintelligence, had done an extraordinary job of capturing nearly every German spy sent to Britain. Many of these agents were recruited to work as double agents feeding false information back to Berlin. The double-cross system gave the Allies complete control over what German intelligence believed was happening in Britain. With Ultra, the Allies could verify their lies were working. With double-cross, they could calibrate exactly what lies to tell. Together, these tools made Fortitude possible. Creating FUSAG, the army that never existed. The heart of Fortitude South was the creation of a phantom military force, the First United States Army Group, known as FUSAG. On paper and in radio transmissions, FUSAG was a massive invasion force, over 1 million men, assembling in southeast England, directly across from Calais. In reality, FUSAG didn't exist. To make the illusion convincing, the Allies used every trick they could think of. They built entire fake army camps in Kent and Sussex, complete with empty tents arranged in neat military rows. They constructed dummy tanks made from inflatable rubber and steel drums, crewed up close, but perfectly convincing from 20,000 feet in the air where German reconnaissance planes would photograph them. They assembled fake landing craft in harbors around Dover, using scaffolding, wood, canvas, and empty 40-gallon barrels. From a distance or from aerial photos, they looked exactly like the real thing. They even built a fake oil storage depot near Dover, made from wooden boards, scaffolding, and old sewer pipes salvaged from bombed buildings. It was unimpressive from the ground, but perfectly believable from reconnaissance aircraft. Set designers from Shepperton Studios, the same people who built movie sets, were brought in to help construct these elaborate fakes. Artists, carpenters, and prop makers worked alongside military engineers to create an entire army out of plywood, canvas, and imagination. But physical props were only part of the deception. The Allies knew German intelligence was monitoring radio traffic across Britain, so they created an entire fake signals unit, real soldiers with real radios, whose only job was to transmit thousands of messages that mimicked the radio traffic of a genuine army preparing to invade. They sent orders, logistical requests, weather reports, and routine administrative chatter. Everything a real military force would generate. The fake radio network had to be meticulously planned. If the volume of traffic was too high, the Germans would be suspicious. If it was too low, they wouldn't notice. The signal strength had to match the supposed location of units. The encryption level had to seem appropriate for the supposed command level. Every detail mattered. Then the Allies added the masterstroke. They gave FUSAG a commander the Germans feared and respected, General George S. Patton. Patton. The Ghost Commander, George S. Patton, was one of the most aggressive and successful American field commanders of the war. He had led the U.S. 7th Army in Sicily and was known for his boldness, his profanity, and his ability to smash through enemy defenses with armored forces. German intelligence considered him the most dangerous general the Allies had. In early 1944, Patton was temporarily sidelined after slapping 2 shell-shocked soldiers in Sicily, an incident that nearly ended his career. Eisenhower needed him for the invasion, but couldn't give him a frontline command yet, so Patton became the perfect candidate to command a fake army. Patton hated the assignment at first. He was a warrior, not an actor. But once he understood the strategic importance, he threw himself into the role. He made speeches to imaginary troops. He attended social events where he knew German agents or their informants would see him. He inspected fake equipment and fake headquarters. His every movement was calculated to be noticed and reported back to Berlin. The Germans took the bait. German intelligence reports from 1944, decrypted by Ultra, confirmed that they believed Patton was commanding a huge invasion force in southeast England preparing to strike Calais. To them, it was obvious. The Allies wouldn't waste their best general on a diversion. If Patton was in Kent, that's where the real invasion would come from. Think about the strange irony of this. Patton, A man who loved battle, who lived for leading tanks into combat, spent months commanding an army that didn't exist, fighting a war of illusion, knowing that his presence was more valuable as a lie than as a soldier. How do you measure the worth of a general who never fires a shot but saves thousands of lives? The double agents, feeding the lie. Physical deception alone wouldn't be enough. The Germans needed human intelligence, reports from spies on the ground to confirm what their reconnaissance and signals intercepts were telling them. That's where the double-cross system became critical. MI5 had recruited several German agents to work as double agents, but three were particularly important for Fortitude. Their code names were Garbo, Brutus, and Tricycle. The Germans trusted these agents completely, believing they were loyal Nazi spies embedded in Britain. In reality, every word they sent to Berlin was written or approved by British intelligence. The art was in making the lies believable. The agents couldn't simply report, "There's a huge army in Kent preparing to invade Calais." That would be too obvious, too convenient. Instead, they reported small, verifiable details. Unit insignia spotted on soldiers' uniforms, vehicle markings seen on trucks, overheard conversations in pubs, construction activity near Dover. The Germans would piece together these fragments of information and draw their own conclusions. That's what made the deception so powerful. Berlin wasn't being told what to believe. They were discovering it themselves, building up a picture from seemingly independent sources that all pointed to the same conclusion. The intelligence agencies had to calibrate the information flow with extreme care. Leaking supposed top-secret invasion plans would have been immediately suspicious, but allowing agents to report minutiae, the kinds of details a real spy would notice and report, built credibility and let German analysts feel like they were piecing together the puzzle on their own. Can you imagine the pressure on the officers running these double agents? One mistake, one detail that didn't match reconnaissance photos, one report that contradicted radio intercepts, and the entire deception could unravel. German intelligence would realize they'd been played, and the real invasion force heading to Normandy would face the full strength of Hitler's army. June 6, 1944. The Reckoning. On the morning of June 6, 1944, Allied forces stormed 5 beaches in Normandy: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Over 150,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen participated in the largest amphibious invasion in history. Casualties were heavy, especially at Omaha Beach, but the Allies established a foothold. And in Berlin, Hitler's high command believed it was a diversion. German intelligence reports, carefully fed by double-cross agents and reinforced by fake radio traffic from FUSAG, insisted that Normandy was a secondary operation. The real invasion, they claimed, was still being prepared in southeast England under Patton and would strike Calais within days or weeks. Hitler believed it. He ordered that the 15th Army, a full field army positioned near Calais, remain in place. He refused to allow panzer divisions stationed in the Pas de Calais area to be transferred to Normandy. For weeks after D-Day, some of Germany's best armored and infantry units sat idle near Calais, waiting for Patton's phantom army to appear. By the time Hitler finally accepted that Normandy was the real invasion and authorized the movement of reserves, it was too late. The Allies had secured the beachhead, landed hundreds of thousands of additional troops and mountains of equipment, and begun breaking out into the French countryside. Military historians have debated how decisive Fortitude was to the success of D-Day. Some argue that German troop limitations and Allied air superiority meant the invasion would have succeeded regardless. Others point to the casualty estimates. Allied planners had expected far higher losses in the initial landings, and the fact that German reinforcements were delayed by days, or, in some cases, never arrived at all, almost certainly saved thousands of lives. What is not debated is this: Operation Fortitude succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. Hitler kept major forces pinned 200 miles from the real battlefield because he believed in an army that never existed. The aftermath: how long can you fool a dictator? Even after the Normandy landings, the Allies continued the Fortitude deception. Patton remained commander of FUSAG until late July 1944, when he was finally given command of the real Third Army and sent to France. Fake radio traffic continued. Double agents kept sending reports about preparations for a second invasion. German intercepts decrypted by Ultra showed that Hitler's staff remained convinced for weeks that the main blow was still coming. Some German units stayed near Calais well into July, long after it became obvious to everyone except Hitler that Normandy was the real invasion. After the war, captured German documents confirmed the effectiveness of the deception. German intelligence estimates from June 1944 showed they believed the Allies had over 85 divisions in Britain preparing to invade. The real number was closer to 35. FUSAG, the Phantom Army, accounted for most of the fictional divisions. Fortitude is now considered one of the greatest intelligence successes in military history. It demonstrated that deception, when executed with precision and supported by signals, intelligence, and double agents, could shape enemy decisions at the highest strategic level. Many of you have asked in comments whether it's ethical to celebrate lies and trickery, even in war. Here's what I want you to consider. Every hour that German panzer divisions sat near Calais waiting for a fake army was an hour that real Allied soldiers were digging in, unloading supplies, and preparing to push inland. Every German regiment that stayed in place because Hitler believed Patton was coming was a regiment that didn't arrive in Normandy to kill American, British, and Canadian soldiers. The soldiers of Fortitude, the artists, set designers, radio operators, intelligence officers, and double agents never fired a shot. But they fought one of the most important battles of the war, and they won it with rubber tanks, fake radio signals, and carefully crafted lies. The broader lesson: imagination as a weapon. Operation Fortitude revealed something profound about modern warfare. Imagination can be as powerful as firepower. The same creative skills used to build movie sets, design stage props, and write fictional characters were weaponized to deceive an enemy and save lives. Set designers from Shepperton Studios built fake oil depots. Artists created insignia for divisions that didn't exist. Writers scripted the biographies and histories of phantom units. Radio operators performed a months-long improvised drama, playing the roles of officers, clerks, and logistics personnel in an army that existed only in the airwaves. And it worked because the deception supported what the Germans already wanted to believe. Hitler expected the invasion at Calais because it was the logical choice. Fortitude didn't fight that expectation, it reinforced it, feeding confirmation bias until the Germans convinced themselves the lie was true. This is the uncomfortable truth about deception. It works best when you tell people what they already suspect. You don't have to create belief from nothing. You just have to nurture the belief that's already there, water it with false evidence, and let it grow into certainty. The human cost: real lives saved by fake armies. Somewhere in Normandy today, there are families whose grandfathers walked off landing craft on June 6, 1944 and survived. Some of them lived because German reinforcements that should have been in Normandy were sitting near Calais, waiting for an army that never came. Those soldiers never knew that inflatable tanks in Kent, or fake radio signals, or George Patton inspecting empty tents had anything to do with their survival. But the connection is real. Fortitude didn't just deceive Hitler, it delayed his response long enough for the Allies to turn a tenuous beachhead into an unstoppable advance. By the time German high command realized there would be no second invasion at Calais, the war in the West was already lost. Military historians estimate that the deception may have saved tens of thousands of Allied lives by reducing German defensive strength in Normandy and delaying counterattacks during the critical first days of the invasion. We'll never know the exact number. We'll never know which specific soldiers lived because a specific panzer division stayed in Calais an extra week. But the math is undeniable. Fewer defenders mean fewer casualties. Here's the question I want you to think about. If you could save 10,000 lives by creating an elaborate lie, by building fake tanks, sending false radio signals, and using actors to play the role of soldiers, would you do it? What if the lie required the work of thousands of people over many months? What if some of those people, pilots flying fake reconnaissance missions, sappers maintaining dummy equipment, were killed maintaining the deception? Operation Fortitude demanded that soldiers risk their lives for a lie, but that lie protected other soldiers who were risking their lives for the truth. Where does the moral math lead you? The legacy: deception as doctrine. Fortitude established military deception as a permanent part of modern warfare. The techniques developed in 1943 and 1944, fake formations, controlled information leaks, signals deception, and the use of double agents, became standard doctrine for NATO and other military alliances. During the Cold War, both sides used fortitude-style deceptions to mislead each other about troop strengths, weapon capabilities, and strategic intentions. In every major conflict since World War II, elements of fortitude can be seen: fake equipment, false radio traffic, planted intelligence. The lesson was clear. In modern war, what the enemy believes can be more important than what the enemy sees. Perception shapes decisions, and decisions shape outcomes. If you can control perception, you can control the battle before a shot is fired. But there's a darker legacy too. Fortitude worked because the Allies had nearly complete control over German intelligence in Britain. They had broken Enigma. They had turned every German spy. They knew what the enemy knew, and they used that knowledge to feed perfectly calibrated lies. In a world where intelligence is fragmented, where information flows through 1,000 channels, where surveillance is ubiquitous and decryption is routine, can deception on this scale ever work again? Or was fortitude a product of a unique moment, a time when breaking one code and turning a handful of agents could give you control over an entire nation's understanding of reality? The uncomfortable truth. Here's what we know. On June 6, 1944, thousands of Allied soldiers landed on hostile beaches in Normandy and fought their way inland. Many died, but many more lived because German reinforcements that should have been waiting for them were 200 miles away, guarding against an invasion that never came. That phantom invasion, FUSAG, Operation Fortitude, the greatest military deception in history, was built from rubber, plywood, radio signals, and lies. It was commanded by a general who never led it into battle, defended by divisions that never existed, and believed in by an enemy who built his entire defensive strategy around stopping it. George Patton played the role of his life as commander of an imaginary army. Set designers from Hollywood studios built battlefields out of canvas and scaffolding. Double agents risked execution to send false reports to Berlin. Radio operators spent months performing an elaborate fiction over the airwaves. And thousands of real soldiers lived because the enemy believed the performance. I want you to imagine something. Somewhere in a cemetery in Normandy, there's a gravestone marking the resting place of a soldier who died on D-Day. A few rows over, there's an empty space, a grave that was never needed because that soldier made it off the beach, survived the war, went home, and lived a full life. What saved him? Better training? Luck? Or the fact that a German panzer company that should have been firing at his landing craft was sitting in a field near Calais, waiting for Patton's ghost army? We celebrate the soldiers who stormed the beaches. We honor the pilots who flew air cover. We remember the sailors who manned the landing craft. But do we remember the artists who painted fake insignia, the radio operators who sent fictional messages, the intelligence officers who scripted lies? They were soldiers too, fighting a different kind of battle, one where victory was measured not in territory taken, but in enemies deceived. Should we teach fortitude in schools alongside D-Day? Should there be monuments to the Phantom Army, the soldiers who never existed but whose existence saved real lives? Operation Fortitude proved that in war truth is precious, so precious that she must be protected by a bodyguard of lies. The lies worked, the truth survived, and thousands of soldiers came home because Hitler believed in an army that was never there. If stories like this matter to you, share this video and subscribe so more people hear them. The tanks were fake. The radio signals were false. The army didn't exist.